Mountaineer Nation, let's ride.
But Don Nealon's Mountaineers enjoy walking in where angels fear to tread. As the hills of West Virginia resound with the sounds of Golden Blue football. Here is Harrison trouble, stiff arms, a would-be tackler, comes down over the 25 to 20, goes around about it to 15 to 10 to 5, a touchdown West Virginia, he did it!
Takes the Slater one-on-one with the defender, look at that run!
West Virginia football, you know what that's about, they don't know what it's about, West Virginia football, we're all our table.
Let them know. Leave no doubt tonight. Leave no doubt tonight. No doubt. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into, I guess, what will amount to the first ever live edition of our Presser Points video series here on the Country Roads webcast, where I'm sure you guys have seen the few I've done, or a couple I think I've done prior to this, just started doing them this offseason, of course, covering Neal Brown's press conferences, kind of the standout parts to me, just playing those video clips, reacting to them a little bit. And I figured, why not give it a shot doing it live? I know this is kind of impromptu, unscheduled, so it may not be too many people in here. But, of course, if you are in here live, drop your thoughts on these thoughts from Neal Brown along the way if you want to. I thought that would be interesting, in between the clips. Maybe if we get some engagement, you guys can share your thoughts. We can talk about that a little bit along the way. But other than that, it's basically just going to function just as the Presser Points video usually does. I'm going to talk a little bit about the clip ahead of time and then kind of give my reaction to it after showing it, but kind of go through Neal Brown's press conference with the few video clips I've jotted down that stood out to me the most. The beginning, of course, is going to be mainly from his opening statement, which was covering the spring scrimmage from today. Took place earlier today, second one inside the stadium I believe they've had this spring, and he kind of broke that down in his opening statement, and then got a few other video clips that came from questions that he was asked, some things that I thought really stood out there. But as far as the scrimmage goes, like I said, second one inside the stadium, seemed like they got to play a little bit more this time. I know the last scrimmage that they had inside the stadium, I believe Nico was sick, if I'm not mistaken, and so they didn't get to do as many reps with the twos as they did with the ones. This time, it definitely sounded like they did. Neal Brown said they got about 40 to 50 snaps with both the first teamers and the second teamers. And then the third teamers also even got about 20 or so snaps themselves as well. So that's kind of how it went for the scrimmage for the Mountaineers there inside the stadium. But we'll get into Neal Brown's comments real quick now. Like I said, I'm going to share my screen with you guys as we go throughout this and share Neal Brown's video clips. Appreciate you, Joe Romano, tuning in and chiming in as always. And like I said, anyone that's in here live, if you are in here, drop a like on the video as always. That really helps us. Be sure and hit the subscribe button if you're a WVU fan and haven't already. Helps us and you. Gets more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. But as always, as I go throughout here on this live stream, be sure to drop your thoughts on Neal Brown's statements here, or anything you have that you want to drop there in the chat. Of course, I'll try and respond to along the way throughout. But let's kick it off here. Like I said, this is coming from Neal Brown's opening statement. He kind of detailed the performances from the scrimmage, and his first thought that he gave was in regards to the defense in the scrimmage. That's what this first clip's going to be in regards to, kind of how some of the defense performed in the scrimmage that took place today, West Virginia's second scrimmage of the spring. So let's get ready and let's check it out here. First clip from Neal Brown.
Start on defense, and Mike Lockhart and Hammond Russell both those guys, we need them. They're probably as integral for us as anybody on either side as far as needing to make a jump this spring. And they have through 12 practices, 4 weeks. They've gotten better, and they've not arrived yet, but I thought both of those guys did some nice things. Bartlett had a couple sacks on third downs. One particular inside a 2-minute drill that really his team won. And then James Hurd, natural pass rusher, probably as natural pass rusher as we've recruited. He'll be a factor for us. He'll play in the fall. Linebacker, I think Lee Koba is probably maybe I don't say it, he from where he was last spring to where he is this spring. He's made the most improvement. I think he's got a chance to be an all league type player. Um, Trey Lathan is a guy that played well today. Had a couple nice plays in short yardage. And then Jai Favaris is really grown into kind of one of those special teams core players and doing some nice things on defense. Defensive back wise, I think Marcus Floyd had a nice day, had a couple good open field tackles, one on CJ in particular. Wilson Lamp made a couple nice plays on the ball, which is good. It's kind of time for him, and he had a nice day. Keyshawn Cobb transfer, played as many snaps as we could get him today, and he'll be a factor. He'll be pushing for a starting job there in the secondary. And Lance Dixon quietly has had a nice spring. We're playing him on the out in space, kind of where he finished last year, and he's getting more accustomed to that. And he's growing is kind of on and off the field. So proud of what he's doing.
All right, so there you get Neal Brown's thoughts on the defense, some kind of things that stood out to me. I don't know about you guys, but the bandit position, I think that it's good to hear both of those guys are performing well. You guys have heard about me rave about James Hurd a couple of times here on the channel, and that's something that the coaching staff keeps mentioning, exactly what Neal Brown said there, that he's probably the best pure pass rusher they've had since they've been here, that they've brought in. So I'm excited to see him get on the field, the way that I've kind of compared it to, is I wouldn't be surprised to see him play a role similar to what Bruce Irvin played in Bruce Irvin's first season, just kind of a pass rushing specialist coming in on passing downs, third down situations, things like that, and maybe playing a role there, because it sounds like Jared Bartlett may have locked down the starting spot there at the Bandit, as kind of we expected. He's kind of been a mainstay there over the past few seasons. Mixed results, but had some really standout performances. We've seen him dominate against Virginia Tech in that game against Morgantown when West Virginia was able to win that first game for the Black Diamond Trophy of 2 that they've won in the past couple of years. And glad to hear Neal Brown say he's having a really strong off season. Good to hear that he's doing better against the run. I think that was kind of the one area he needed to improve a little bit, but sounds like he's gotten a bigger, stronger, faster by all accounts. So hopefully Jared Bartlett can make some plays. West Virginia needs that bandit position to be a factor. It really has yet to be a factor here at West Virginia the way it was for this staff when they were back at Troy. And then in the secondary, of course, that's where we're all concerned about, right? Aubrey Burks, you guys have heard me rave about him as well. I loved his performance late last season. One of the highest graded safeties in the entire country, highest graded safety in the Big 12 Conference last season, actually, according to PFF. And I think he's one of the top safeties in not only the conference, but maybe in the country coming into this season. Low key, a lot of people are kind of sleeping on Aubrey Burks, saying he's going to be a big time player for the Mountaineers, as you heard Neal Brown state there. But it's the other pieces in the secondary we got to get some bodies. That's particularly there at cat safety. Marcus Floyd, hopefully he's improving. Good to hear Neal Brown say that he is. And then Keyshawn Cobb that we brought in, I think that he could end up as the starter there. I really like him a lot. And then the cornerback spots, he mentioned Andrew Wilson Lamp and Jacoby Spells both needing to come on. 100% agree with that. Got to have both those guys get better, because maybe one of those will end up as the starter on the opposite side. You never know. And then Montre Miller, who you mentioned having a little bit up and down, can really run, but just adjusting to the system. And I think once he gets adjusted, he's going to be a really good player. Personally, I've got him penciled in as a starter on one of the cornerback sides. So that's kind of Neal Brown's thoughts there from the scrimmage today about the defense there that he detailed in his opening thoughts. What's going on, Silas? Good to see you in here, man, as always. But let's hear about what Neal Brown said in regards to the offense there as it continued on in his opening statement, detailing a little bit of the performance of the offense in the scrimmage, including the two quarterbacks, both Garrett Green and Nico Marchio. And it sounds like Garrett Green had a bit of an explosive day. Let's hear a little bit about the offensive performance in today's scrimmage from Neal Brown's press conference earlier today.
Offensively, I'll start with the quarterbacks. I know that's, y'all probably as much as anything y'all want to hear. just talk about each of them individually. Garrett, I'll talk about him first. And we're just alternating these guys. So they went some with the ones and some with the twos. So as I talk about them, just know that could have been with the ones, could have been with the twos, but he had 3 explosive runs. One probably 60 plus yards, and then threw the deep ball very well today. 2 that are really fresh in my mind on go balls, and then made a couple of mistakes on third down. You gotta have some situational awareness, gotta have some field awareness where he's at. Took a sack that he probably shouldn't have, but some explosive plays, and scrambled around and did some nice things too on some broken plays. Nico had 2 nice drives, and what I mean by that is he converted multiple third downs, and we forget, he's in his second spring. He's a redshirt freshman. He's right in the middle of this thing, but he's young. And today I thought he just made the simple decisions. I think a lot of times in football, it's, not getting yourself beat. And he didn't on those 2 drives, especially early in practice. He just made good decisions. If it was a handoff, he handed it off, right? Third down completion, not taking sacks. Just did a nice job and showing some maturation there, which is good to see. I thought wideout, Jayshon Polk has had a nice week, and so he's been a little bit battling a leg injury, but he was healthy this week. And while we got him, got an opportunity to be a factor in the return game, and then get him the ball where he can make some explosive plays and he can run. And so he had a nice day. Devin Carter, I haven't talked about him in a little bit, but he's been really consistent. And then tight end, Cole Taylor and Will Dixon both had some nice catches, especially down in the red zone, which is something we need. And then I thought all 4 of the running backs did some good stuff. CJ went full today. Had a couple, was really good in our short yardage period. I thought Tony Mathis may have had his best day of the spring, and then Jalen and Justin both had some nice runs, and Justin's getting really comfortable of reading some of our run plays. So all 4 of those guys had a nice day. We've got so Tuesday and Thursday we'll get after pretty good, and then we'll have some fun on Saturday for the spring game. So that's kind of rundown. Y'all ask questions, Greg.
All right, so there you hear Neal Brown's kind of rundown on the offense, bit of an up and down, sounded like from the quarterback, some explosive plays, but also a few mistakes from both of those guys. But I think overall, what you're looking at the offense, we know about the running backs, we know about the offensive line. Both of those are probably going to be very strong pieces for this team, of course, and what we're going to rely on potentially. But what we're looking to see develop here, I think, throughout the spring and into fall camp, of course, is we need to see some of these receivers develop. We've heard a lot about Devin Carter. I think he's there as the number 1. He's definitely one guy they're solid on. It's just looking to find the other pieces. So it's nice to hear something about a guy like a Jayshon Polk having a good game there, having a good scrimmage, I guess. So I think later on, I've got a clip as well where Neal Brown talks more about the wide receivers. I think that's actually the final clip, as we'll just go through in chronological order with the clips that I've got pointed out here. But he talks more about Cortez Braham as well, who also had, I think, maybe the best scrimmage of any of the receivers. He just kind of failed to mention it in his opening statement, but he talks more about that later. So good to hear some of the other names other than Devin Carter be mentioned, because every press conference that we've heard from Neal Brown and mostly others this spring, the only name we've really heard is Devin Carter and the occasional Preston Fox as well. So hopefully need some other receivers to step up, and I think that's why it's one of the positions West Virginia will be targeting in the transfer portal, as they look to add a few more pieces here as we get ready to head into the summer months, where West Virginia will make some transfer additions. Transfer portal window just opened today, open for a couple of weeks there, but that's kind of my thoughts on his opening statements. Like I said, you guys, as I continue throughout the live stream, feel free to drop your questions, thoughts, concerns, comments in, as always, even though it's a little bit different than a Q&A live stream. Of course, it's one of our video series, just doing it live just for the fun of it, like interacting with you guys live. So figured why not. But the next clip I've got here is one that I'm sure everyone will be interested in. It's one of the coolest pieces of news to come out recently, I guess you could say, or definitely one of the more peculiar ones, because you don't see it quite that often. And that's, of course, the news of Jimmy Bell giving football a try right now in the spring for a couple of weeks, and then going to make a decision if he wants to keep playing basketball, play football, play both, what he's going to do. And of course, the coaching staff having to decide if they want to keep him around and if they think he has the potential enough to help them for them to want to keep him around. But he was asked a little bit about Jimmy Bell's performance thus far when he's been with the team, as well as his performance in the scrimmage, of course, today as well. So these are Neal Brown's thoughts on Jimmy Bell today.
So just him getting used to punching and the importance of ball get off. And so what I do like about him, he's extremely coachable. And Hug said he was, and he definitely is extremely coachable. He works hard. I think he's had an open mind on this. And I went into it with zero expectations, and what I told him is, hey, let's teach you, and he's played football. All right. So this isn't like, hey, rolling out there and playing football for the first time. He's played football. It's been since 16 or 17. Last time he played. Played as a junior in high school. His last year he played. He got recruited some. He's also about 60 pounds heavier. But when he went to prep school out in Arizona, they didn't have football, and he just played basketball. And he's been playing since. So he has some knowledge of playing the game. But we went 2 weeks and just did fundamentals, just kind of get him. And we did some cardio things because it's different. And then this week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, he's practiced, and we're going to do the same next Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and give us some time to regroup and see if it's something that we think can work, or he thinks that he wants to make happen. And I just try to keep expectations in reason. It's a really tough transition, but he's attacked it, and so he went today. Probably, I don't have it in front of him, but I'm betting he probably went 25 plays live within an 11-on-11 period, and did some pass protection and some inside drill as well. And he's getting better. Like, you can see considerable growth since Tuesday.
All right. So as you can hear there, I think that's relatively positive compared to, what, because the last time, when Neal Brown was asked about it, when the news was first kind of broken, I don't want to say Neal Brown was negative about it, but you could definitely tell that he wanted to kind of temper expectations the way that he really drove home. This is a trial run. I mean, it's really a trial run. He said that several times. So I think that, he was kind of maybe not only trying to temper our expectations, but maybe his own before he could see how this worked out on the field. But it sounds like, in my opinion, from what he said there, that throughout, the time he's seen him in practice, he's improved steadily. So who knows, maybe this is something that could really turn out to be a thing for Jimmy Bell, and maybe he'll stick with it and be a part of the team for this season and next. We'll see what happens there. And I'm sure there'll be plenty more to report on that moving forward as Jimmy Bell tries to find a spot on the offensive line. In regards to that offensive line, Neal Brown was asked later on how the offensive line was functioning, especially without Zach Frazier at center, who they're kind of sitting out for the majority of this spring. No need to try and risk injury to what is probably the best player in your team, and in my opinion, probably the best center in college football. Definitely the best center in the Big 12, I think, and poised for a really good season, preseason All-American for the Mountaineers. So he's not really being used a ton this spring. And Neal Brown also adds that they've had injuries to, Doug Nestor and Wyatt Milam, minor at times, injuries and sickness that have kept them out. So they have been getting reps from some of the other players that'll play, reserve roles this season. But Neal Brown talked a little bit about how the offensive line was functioning this spring without Zach Frazier, using guys like Brandon Yates at center there snapping the ball. So here's Neal Brown's thoughts in regard to the offensive line this spring without Zach Frazier so much.
We need at least a D lineman, and we've seen kind of what we're doing at corner.
Are you pleased with how the O line has functioned without Frazier this spring?
Well, we've so Milo missed some time. Doug's missed a little bit of time because he was sick, and then Frazier has not been out there. I think you try to find the silver lining in all of it. So the silver lining with Frazier, first of all, is Doug Nestor, his leadership ability is really grown, and he's kind of been pushed, and Wyatt Milam's been pushed out of his shell a little bit where he's having to speak more. So I think those are long-term really, really good things. And what it does is it forces you as a coach, when you've had some guys out, like Brandon Yates has had a great spring. He's played all inside, and man, he's done a really good job. I'm really excited for him and what the fall looks like for him. But as a coach, like with Wyatt missed on Tuesday and Thursday. Well, that causes you to, it forces you to, for guys to get reps versus the best players we got. And so in the long run, that helps, right? And so I feel because those guys have missed some time, we've had to put our younger guys out there versus the ones, and I'm probably more comfortable now than maybe even I assumed we would be at the start.
Goods.
So as you can hear, there may be a little bit of a positive coming out of a bit of a negative at times, especially when it comes to, Doug Nestor and Wyatt Milan when they've had to be out. I think Zach Frazier's a little bit more of a planned absence, right? But a good thing coming out of that is they're maybe going to be able to play some guys and rely on some guys in a reserve role or however minimal the role may be, going to be able to rely on some guys that maybe in the fall they thought they wouldn't be able to yet. And I think Neal Brown went on to mention a guy like a Sully Weidman, who he's really compared to a Thomas Remick about this time last year. And we know Remick ended up being a big piece and becoming the third straight freshman All-American for the Mountaineers along the offensive line, right? So definitely I think that that's good news for the offensive line is seeing guys get reps. They're going to need it because, if something happens to Zach Frazier, now you know that Brandon Yates has experience snapping the ball. He can slide over there and you got potential. And I like the move of Brandon Yates playing inside. I know Neal Brown mentioned that there as well. I think that's a good move for him. He struggled at tackle at times in the past. We've seen that be a mixed bag for him. Jaquay Hubbard kind of still in that spot. Looks like Doug Nestor is going to slide out there. So even if he's not, at center, obviously we're going to have Zach Frazier there, but he can be a backup for you at center or either of the guard positions. So a really good piece that you can move around along the interior. So I like the development of West Virginia's offensive line. Believe it's going to be the strength of the entire team this season. Certainly the strength of the offense. We know that, right? A lot of returning players along that offensive line for the third straight season. So got the potential to be the best offensive line we've seen in West Virginia in quite some time. And hopefully that pays off. But what we really need to see, I think, is the defense improve, right? That's what we're all hoping and expecting to see and needing to see for this team to be better. The defense left a lot to be desired last season and really took a big drop off from what we had seen from this Neal Brown coaching staff during the first few years. 2020 having the number one pass defense in the country, really high ranked in the defense that season. And 2021, no slouch either. That's so much, but last year really we know took a huge step back. Secondary was a big reason why. A lot of poor tackling, a lot of communication issues as well, I think. But Neal Brown was asked how he thinks the defense has improved just from what he's seen in the spring thus far. So Neal Brown gave his thoughts on what he thinks the defense has improved at and why he thinks this defense certainly will be better this year than it was last year. Let's check out some of his thoughts from today.
We're faster on defense. Fundamentally, we are better. In tackling today, we tackled better in that stadium. Definitely improved over where we were 2 weeks ago, first time we went really live. Some of those questions I'm not going to be able to answer you until we go and play games, right? I'm very confident that we're going to be better than we were a year ago. Will we miss Dante? Yes. Dante's a great player. He's going to get drafted. We're definitely going to miss him. But do I think we'll be better as a defense overall? Absolutely. I have full confidence in that. I think fundamentally, first of all, our pad level's better, where our angles and our strain to get to the ball is better. We're doing a better job of shedding blocks, which is very, very important, something that we were below average at last year. So, I think we're progressing. I'm not saying we've arrived, but we're progressing.
All right, so there you go. Good news if you're a Mountaineer fan, right? At least on the outside looking in that he's saying those things. But I hesitate a little bit just because last offseason we heard that they wanted to get faster, and we had heard that they were faster. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but I don't think that they realized that we haven't forgotten that we heard Jordan Leslie and I think Neal Brown both say, or at least one of the two, I know, said that they felt like last year's defense could be the best they've had at WVU, and we saw it be the worst they've had at WVU. So despite those great things that he's saying, I'm waiting to see the proof myself because the proof's going to be in the pudding, of course, just like it was last season. But fingers crossed he's correct there because those improvements would be huge for West Virginia if the defense is improving at those things and can be a lot better. It's going to lead to a lot better season for the Mountaineers and a lot better team overall, of course. And we know that the area that really needs to improve on that defense, of course, is the secondary. Neal Brown was asked about the cornerbacks kind of as a follow-up to that. Let's hear Neal Brown's thoughts on how the cornerbacks are performing throughout the spring thus far for West Virginia.
What's your thought of your cornerback situation?
Yeah, so I think if you look at it, Montre, he's had some ups and downs. He can run. I think the more comfortable he gets in the system, he's going to be. I think he's going to be a solid Big 12 player for us, and that's what we thought when we took him from Kent State. Great guy, he works, he's hungry. Lamp and Spells are both growing. I think that those are the two guys that we really need to make a move. And there's been some ups and some downs in the spring, but I think those guys are going to be guys we can count on to play. Malachi continues Malachi Ruffin played good football for us at the end of the year. He made the one really boneheaded play that went viral against Oklahoma State, but he also made two hell of a plays at the end of the Oklahoma State game too. And he really played pretty solid football. And so he's always going to be kind of a steady guy out there. And we've added a player, and we may even add another one. Maybe not at corner, but in the secondary. May add another one.
Mute my mic first and then talk probably would help. But interesting stuff there from Neal Brown. Of course, I like the final comments. He of course mentions we added a player. He's talking about Beanie Bishop. He of course can't mention him by name until he signs his letter of intent. But of course, did a video on him here on the channel, and I'm sure you guys have heard about that already. Going to help West Virginia hopefully there in the cornerback spot. Like I said, I really like Montre Miller, who Neal Brown mentioned. Like I said, having ups and downs right now, still adjusting to the system, but really fast. And I think he'll be a starter for the Mountaineers. Then on the other side, you got guys like Wilson Lamp, who he mentioned in Spells. Spells, the highest rated recruit in last year's recruiting class. Really overall a big win there for West Virginia to get him out of Miami. And we saw him make some plays last season, the pick 6 against Virginia Tech to kind of seal that win and finish them off, stands out. So I think he has a ton of potential. And Wilson Lamp, we've been told, is one of the fastest guys on the team, came as a wide receiver, transitioned to defensive back, and is really this year is probably where it's going to be his time to contribute, whether he starts or is, there on the 2 deep. But I like the potential of both those guys. And then Malachi Ruffin, who of course he mentioned kind of flying under the radar, going unmentioned, the former preferred walk-on. We weren't really expecting to see him play a ton last year. He ended up being counted on a lot towards the end of the season, really started off rough and then ended up having a few bright spots there that really helped the Mountaineers get the wins over those couple of Oklahoma schools. And then I like his last comment there, maybe adding someone else that's going to help them at the safety position. To me, that screams Anthony Wilson, who I covered earlier today in a video on the channel when I was updating the transfer portal targets. And actually, me and our friend Mountaineer Paul did a video as well talking about Anthony Wilson even more in depth. It's going to be up over on his channel. It may even be up at the time that I'm streaming this right now. It should be up soon. He just texted me about it a little bit ago. So definitely, if that's up, head over there, check that out for sure after you finish watching the stream here. But, as far as the defense is concerned for West Virginia, we know the secondary's got to improve. I like what we have at the cornerback spot, especially if we add even another body there. We know Beanie Bishop's coming, but Wilson from Penn State, we know we've been in on him for a while. Would love to see us add him there to the mix as well. But I think we got guys with potential, just got to see it on the field. Safety's the one I'm concerned about. Got to get 4 guys there. I think we got about 3 right now. So if we could land Anthony Wilson, that would help a lot. And of course, Hershey McLaurin now moving down to the spear, and you got different bodies there with him and Lance Dixon. But there at the deep safety, like I said, solid at the free safety with Aubrey Burks. It's the cat safety where we got to get some guys into the mix there. Marcus Floyd working there with Keyshawn Cobb, who Keyshawn Cobb have a high expectations for, but I think we need one more body there as well, as Neal Brown mentioned. So that's something to look out for moving forward. As far as flipping it back to the offense, one of the things that really stood out to me and I thought was very interesting was Neal Brown's comments in regards to the fullbacks that West Virginia's added. I know I did a video on the addition of Luke Hamilton in the past, an FCS All-American that the Mountaineers have added, but he's a fullback, not a tight end. We haven't seen the Mountaineers have any fullbacks on the roster really in the Neal Brown era up until this point, where they now have 2 on the roster. Both guys are preferred walk-ons, but sounds like there may be a plan to use them. I don't know how much this year, but definitely in the future for both these preferred walk-ons at fullback, Colin McBee and Luke Hamilton. And Neal Brown was asked about the addition of fullbacks to this year's roster and how they may factor in. Here's his thoughts on those.
This year, what do you thought of what you got?
Yeah, so getting big soccer updates here. So if you look at me, yeah, we're down in Charleston playing soccer. So we those kids we're getting them reps, and we played with a fullback all the time at Troy because we really struggled to recruit tight ends there and at that level. So we used the fullback a lot. We've got 2, Luke Hamilton, who's a natural fullback, and then Colin McBee he's just a football player from right here in town. Like, he's a good football player. He can block, and we're trying to get him bigger where he can be a fullback. But we still handed him the ball a good bit. And I really believe, I don't know about this fall, but at some point he's going to be somebody that plays for us. Um, but Luke and Kylan are both playing that fullback role. Yeah, and I do think how big a role to be determined, but I think both those guys can do some things to help us.
All right, so there you hear good news in regards to the use of fullbacks. We know West Virginia has a ton of tight ends on the roster, but we hadn't heard much about the fullbacks since they joined the roster, but we knew they were there, Luke Hamilton and Colin McBee. I think he's been asked a couple times, but it was good to get his thoughts there kind of in depth on both of those guys. And very interesting that he really seems to hold Colin McBee, the local product, in high regard to the point where it sounds like in some of these scrimmages, he's getting carries even. So not only are these fullbacks going to be used in the blocking game, as we know, but sounds like they have the potential to maybe get some carries whenever they do get involved in the West Virginia offense, whether that be at some point this year or down the line. But good to hear about some fullbacks and tight ends on the roster. West Virginia with a good offensive line and good running back room. And who knows what type of offense we're going to see from the Mountaineers this year to really accentuate that run game and accentuate those fullbacks and tight ends. But I think it's going to be interesting to find out. But we mentioned, the run game being a strength, but the passing game is where we're going to need to really have some improvements, particularly on the guys on the outside where West Virginia lost their top 4 wide receivers, 2 to graduation, a couple more to the transfer portal, as we know. So West Virginia having to almost wholesale replace the wide receiver room this year. So it's really just a matter of guys needing to prove themselves. We've heard a lot about Devin Carter, and I think he's going to be a big-time player for the Mountaineers. But kind of the last clip I have here that will close out this edition of our Presser Points video series here on the Country Roads webcast with Neal Brown's spring practice update here following the second spring scrimmage with his April 15th press conference. He was asked about the wide receivers and kind of talked about some of those other guys outside of Devin Carter, and this was kind of good to hear. And this is where you hear the praise for Cortez Braham, who is a JUCO player for the Mountaineers. That would be great to see them have him come on this year and have a really good season because West Virginia, I think, needs somebody on the other side opposite of Devin Carter still to step up, and he's one of the guys that could potentially do that. But Neal Brown mentions him as well as some of the other West Virginia wide receivers here in our final clip here on Presser Points on the Country Roads webcast.
Graham and maybe some of the other receivers. Seen any movement?
Cortez made 2 nice. I should have included him, really. He made 2 nice plays today. He's probably a leading receiver in the scrimmage, John. So I'm glad you asked about him. I'm pleased. I went into this spring thinking, we're trying to put our receivers in some pressure situations. Obviously, it's a whole new room, which in old days would freak you out. Today's world kind of just is what it is. But Devin Carter, after watching him work in the winter, I knew kind of what he was going to be, and I think he's got a chance to even improve on what he was at NC State. And then Cortez, I feel really good exiting as we go into our last week about some of the things he's done. And then we need Jeremiah Aaron, Jay-Sean Polk. Preston's been really solid again. Hudson Clements had a nice spring. So we just need some of those guys. Jarrell Williams, we need some of those guys to keep coming.
So there you have it, Neal Brown's thoughts on the wide receivers. Like he said, still need some of those guys just to continue to improve and get better, specifically kind of the younger ones and stuff. But I think it's interesting that we've heard a few Hudson Clement references throughout this spring. And I've mentioned, I think that he seems to me tailor-made to follow in the path of a couple guys ahead of him, Grayson Malashevich a couple years ago and Preston Fox last year, that started their careers as preferred walk-ons, but really began standing out at that position and earning scholarships. And I wouldn't be surprised to hear of Hudson Clement earning one in the near future. And who knows what type of role he could play at that position throughout his career as a Mountaineer. So interesting there. But like I said, someone needing to step up on the other side. So glad to hear that Cortez Braham did have a strong scrimmage today for the Mountaineers and kind of had a standout performance. And I think Preston Fox is going to play a role on this team this year. We saw him play some spot role last year, but I think he's going to be more in the mix this year. I think that those are the 2 names that I've heard brought up the most, honestly, is Devin Carter and Preston Fox throughout this spring. So the Mountaineers going to hopefully add one more wide receiver via the transfer portal, and maybe that's the guy that lines up the starter on the opposite side of Devin Carter. I know Jaquay Jackson is one they're targeting from the Division II route. He's in that transfer target video I uploaded earlier on the channel, so check that out if you haven't already. But just wanted to give Presser Points a chance live, see how it went with you guys. Kind of an impromptu live stream. These do happen occasionally. I'm going to try and continue to do more and more live streams with you guys. I really enjoy the live interaction. And of course, we'll have the next spring Q&A stream coming up here in a couple of days. So be on the lookout for that, and announcements on when that will be will, of course, come on our social media. And then, of course, a post here on our YouTube channel as well. But be sure tune into our Twitter at WVU Country Roads, Facebook and Instagram Country Roads Webcast on the announcement on when our next Q&A live stream will be, and we can interact more with you guys live. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this Presser Points video live. And if you didn't get a chance to tune in live, hopefully you're watching on the playback. But whether you're live or on a playback, give us a thumbs up, hit that like button. Really helps this video's performance and future videos performances here on the channel. And be sure hit the subscribe button. Helps us, helps you, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. And click that notification bell beside that subscribe button so that when I do go with these impromptu live streams that I don't schedule and announce ahead of time, you'll know when we're up. It'll give you a little notification. You can pop in here and interact with us live. But appreciate everybody that had a chance to tune into this live. Silas says, appreciate the updates. Let's go. Hey, Mountaineer, Silas. Let's go, Mountaineers, as always. Appreciate you, Silas. You're always loyal to tune in and chime in. And appreciate all of you others that do that as well. And looking forward to many more live streams coming up in the near future. Hopefully some breaking news comes, whether it be on the football or basketball side. Not going to give any hints as to which, but I'm sure you guys that have been reading the tea leaves know, and maybe we can do a live stream in regards to that as well. But like I said, Q&A live stream coming up in a couple of days regardless, so be on the lookout for that. But appreciate you guys tuning into this Presser Points video. Like I said, be on the lookout for that video over on Mountaineer Paul Talks Football here on YouTube. We got a great video breaking down Anthony Wilson, our current transfer portal target for the Mountaineers at the safety position. So check that out as well. Appreciate you guys tuning into this one. Be back with you guys live again in the near future. And if you're tuning into this on a playback, appreciate that as well. Any way that you take in our Mountaineer sports content here at the Country Roads Webcast, we're appreciative of it, and we'll have plenty of it coming hot and heavy here as we continue through spring football and into the off season, heading into the 2023 Mountaineer football season, which we're excited about, as I'm sure all of you are as well. But having said that, as always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.